Edward II was born on April 25, 1284, at Caernarfon Castle in Wales. He was the son of King Edward I, a terrifying war king who spent his life fighting and forcing people to obey. From the moment Edward II was a child, everyone expected him to become the same kind of man. But he didn't. Edward grew up softer. He liked comfort. He liked entertainment. He liked being surrounded by people he trusted. And more than anything, he wanted to choose his own friends, even if the rest of the kingdom hated them. When Edward was still a prince, he became very close to a knight named Piers Gaveston. Gaveston was bold, funny, and confident. Edward didn't treat him like a normal court servant. He treated him like someone who mattered. The nobles noticed right away, and they didn't just dislike it, they felt insulted by it. To the nobles, Gaveston was an outsider, not born into their world, not worthy of standing near the future king. And the more Edward favored him, the more they started to hate both of them. In 1307, Edward I died. The old warrior king was gone, and the young prince became King Edward II. Almost immediately, Edward did what everyone feared. He pulled Gaveston even closer and gave him huge power. Titles, wealth, influence. A man the nobles already hated was now standing at the king's side like a second ruler. At Edward's coronation in 1308, the tension was obvious. Edward also married Isabella of France, a princess meant to strengthen England's alliances. But even on days that should have been full of glory, the kingdom felt divided. The nobles pushed back hard. They forced rules onto the king to limit his power and demanded that Gaveston be sent away. Edward resisted. He brought Gaveston back anyway. For Edward, it was simple. This was his friend. He wasn't going to give him up. For the nobles, it was a warning. The king would not listen. In 1312, the nobles decided they were done waiting. They captured Gaveston and executed him. Edward was king, and they had killed the man closest to him. That moment changed him. Now it wasn't just politics, it was personal. Edward became colder, more stubborn, more desperate to prove he couldn't be controlled. But then he suffered a humiliation that made everything worse. In 1314, Edward led an English army into Scotland and was crushed at the Battle of Bannockburn. England didn't just lose. It was a disaster that made Edward look weak in front of everyone. A king who couldn't win battles was a king people didn't fear. And in medieval politics, that was deadly. After Bannockburn, Edward clung even harder to the people he trusted. And soon a new favorite rose into power. Hugh le Despenser the Younger, along with Despenser's father. At first, it looked like Edward had simply found another close ally. But Despenser didn't just want friendship. He wanted control. Despenser started taking land, money, and influence. He used the king's protection to crush rivals. He made enemies everywhere, powerful lords, local families, and even the queen. And Edward backed him. Edward didn't just keep Despenser close, he gave him real authority. In official government orders, Edward called Despenser our beloved and faithful Hugh le Despenser the Younger, and he ordered officials to follow what Despenser told them to do. To many people, it felt like England had become a hostage country, ruled by a king who wouldn't let go of his favorite, and a favorite who was turning power into personal loot. By the early 1320s, the anger boiled over into open rebellion. Civil war erupted. Edward fought back, and for a while it looked like he had won. He punished enemies. He tightened his grip. He acted like a king who finally had control. But the hate didn't disappear. It waited. And then the real danger came from inside his own household. Queen Isabella had been watching Despenser's rise and what it was doing to the country and to her position. She was increasingly pushed aside, disrespected, treated like she didn't matter. In 1325, Isabella went to France, and she refused to come back while Despenser still controlled the king. In France, she joined forces with Roger Mortimer, a powerful enemy of Edward who had escaped into exile. And together they planned something unthinkable. They would invade England and remove the king. In 1326, Isabella and Mortimer landed in England with a small force. But what made it terrifying wasn't their army. It was how fast people joined them. Nobles switched sides. Towns opened their gates. Support poured in, because to many people, Isabella didn't look like a rebel. She looked like the person coming to end Despenser's rule. Edward panicked and ran. Despenser ran with him. But the kingdom had already turned. Despenser was captured, and this time there would be no mercy. He was executed in a brutal public killing. Edward II was captured too. Now the king who once refused to be controlled had no power at all. In January 1327, Edward was forced to give up the crown. His son became King Edward III. Edward II, the King of England, became a prisoner. He was moved between castles, guarded, watched, and isolated. Eventually, he was held at Berkeley Castle. In September 1327, Edward II died in captivity. Many believe he was murdered. The famous story about how he was killed is widely treated as a later rumor and not proven. What is clear is this: he was alive, then he was a prisoner, and then he was dead. And the people who removed him stayed in power. Edward II was buried at Gloucester Cathedral. And that was the end of his story. A boy born to a warrior king, a man who trusted favorites more than politics, a ruler weakened by defeat, and finally a king removed by his own wife and replaced by his own son.